say Guten Morgen. Welcome to the bucket courses. Everything you want to learn before you kick the bucket. I'm Joanne Bundy. I chair the Community Education Council, which is happy to bring you the bucket courses. And this is the time when I say, please remember to silence your cell phones. And we are wired for T-coil. If your hearing aids accommodate T-coil, you can turn that on. I have one announcement this morning, but I'm going to leave that until the end of the class so that we can get started right away on our class this morning. Sig Barber is professor of German at Grinnell College. He is a person who has many interests and many talents. I know that you enjoyed having him here before because we've had many requests to have him back. And perhaps you have seen him in the community theater with his acting and singing and dancing. I don't know how much of that he will do during the course, but you're welcome anytime. So I'm happy to turn it over to Sig Barber and German history and culture through the eyes of literature. Please welcome back Sig Barber.
Well, good morning, or guten Morgen. First of all, I'm going to say something totally unimportant, insignificant, which is that. Have you heard? Did you hear that? Can you hear me in the back?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, all over. Okay. Just out of curiosity, since you all enjoy that Guten Morgen, how many here have some German heritage, some German in their background? Yeah, that's as I suspected, because that sort of reflects the population of Iowa, indeed much of the country. Since Joanne started in German, it would actually be easier for me to do this entire thing in German because that's how I've always taught it. So this is new for me. I'm also used to teaching to a group of about 15, and we've all read the literature already, and we spend that time talking about it, analyzing it in German, of course. So I'm not used to lecturing. The lecture is usually embedded inside the analysis and the discussion of the work. But we'll try to make this work somehow. So you brushed up on your German prior to this. I'm not gonna, it would be fun actually to teach a language, just a sort of an entry-level exploratory language course. But that would be difficult because you all have to participate in that. The difficult thing to figure out in something like this is, where do we begin? And logically, that would be at the beginning, as Aristotle says. However, what's the beginning? That's not as easy a question as one might think. We can go back this far to the red arrow there, and that's the Neander Valley in Germany. And the Neander Valley, the word for valley in German is Tal. Originally in Germanic and Old High German pronounced Thal. And so that's the Neanderthal. So the first German, stretching it a bit, is actually this guy, maybe. So that's the Neanderthal. However, I don't know much about him, and he didn't write very much. And so this was a very short class. We could, the beginning might be, for Germany, for example, it would be 1871. Germany hasn't been a nation really since 1871. Austria, 1919. Switzerland goes back a little further to 1290-91. But these are political beginnings, and we're more interested in talking about culture, literature, the arts. So we go back. The usual place to begin is with Caesar and the Roman Empire. About the 1st century before the Common Era, BC. During this time, which slide do I have? During this time, there was a great deal of interaction between Romans and Germanic tribes. After the conquest of Gaul, Caesar undertook many military, let's see if this one, here, this was usually the contact that we had, and he had many campaigns into Germanic territory. The first important date that we have from this period is what this slide predicts, which is the year 9 of the Common Era. On that day, under the Germanic leader Hermann, or the Roman name Arminius, 3 Roman legions were defeated, which ended the eastward expansion of the Roman Empire, and the Rhine became the border. This is an incredibly important year for German culture. This is the statue that commemorates the Cheruscan general who defeated those 3 Roman legions in the year 9. This is a 102-foot tall statue that stands up near the Teutoburger forest in northern Germany. When I say northern, by the way, I'm actually from Austria. My relatives are all in the south, and to me anything north of Munich is north. Is also my language. I also took a page from JR's presentation. You wore black snake, white snake stuff. We don't have black and white snakes, but I wore my Austrian vest for you this morning. I don't know what I'll do next week. Yeah. So also, at this time, since the Germanic tribes were a great threat to the Romans built a wall, which may sound, unfortunately, the Germans did not pay for it. But they built a wall that you can see here, which goes through, well, what's basically on the Rhine and the Danube in the south there. And this was called the Limes, L-I-M-E-S. I don't know if I have a picture of that there. Here, let's go to this one instead. It was basically, this was what the wall looked like. This barrier, ditches, and with guard posts every so often. And here is, and there were obviously, there had to be places where the troops would be barracked and would sleep. And this is one, this is sort of the Roman castle in Salzburg, which I visited as a 4th grader. And I still kept, I'm not very good at keeping things, but I kept the brochure since the 4th grade a few years ago. And what I remember that impressed me most about it is they had an enclosed case, and there was a skeleton in there. And as I recall, it said Roman soldier. And I thought, cool. A Roman skeleton. I've seen a Roman. And that has stayed with me forever. So we had that fortification. There you see it. The most information, I've mentioned the Germanic tribes. The best information we actually have about the Germanic tribes, we have from Tacitus, who was okay. Hang on, I got my slides were a little, got confused a bit, but nevertheless, Tacitus. Tacitus was a Roman who in the first century of Common Era wrote in general terms about the Germanic tribes. 98 is the year in which we assume that his Germania was written. And he wrote, as I say, in general terms about the Germanic tribes, the Teutons, the Alemanni, the Vandals that you've probably heard of, the Goths, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, and the Burgundians, about whom we'll learn more later. And I just want to point out a few of the things that Tacitus, in his Germania, found significance. I couldn't find a picture of Tacitus, so I can't give that to you. So the first thing that we have is a page that I don't have, which is interesting. What was I going to say about that? Well, it's interesting. Tacitus felt that the Germanic peoples, and we should probably just call them Germans from now on, it's a lot easier. I'll go back and forth. Tacitus feels that the Germanic tribes, were the original inhabitants of their realm. And he gives a very good scientific explanation for this. He surmises that to travel to Germany, you had to cross dangerous oceans, and the reason for that would be to visit harsh, unwelcome climate. And as he says, and this is paraphrased, who in their right mind would go there? Unless they were native. So he considers the Germans to be distinct, unmixed, or a pure race. He didn't mean much more than that about it, but unfortunately that was used as a basis later for some horrible propaganda. Obviously we'll talk about that more. He also notes, Tacitus notes, that these Germanic tribes, warriors, they all have fierce blue eyes, red hair, huge frames, fit only for a sudden exertion. We have to keep in mind what were the circumstances in which the Romans and the Germanic tribes would meet. Yes, in battle. So why wouldn't they have anything but fierce eyes? And red hair, you might think, but what about blue eyes, blonde hair? Well, we know that the Germanic tribes prior to battle would color their hair red to look more fierce. So we have to be cautious about some things that Tacitus said. We also know that Tacitus was really concerned about the decadence in Rome at the time and the decline in morals, and he makes plenty of statements about that, and to some extent builds up the Germanic tribes with the notion of the noble savage. As he says at one point, that adultery and doing such thing is a serious offense there, and is not just written off as the sign of the times as here in Rome. Nevertheless, we have plenty of good information from him. For example, he reports on the importance of the shield for the Germanic warrior. As he says, "To abandon your shield is the basest of crimes, nor may a man thus disregard, nor may a man thus disgraced be present at the sacred rites or enter their council. Many indeed, after escaping from battle, have ended their infamy by hanging themselves." That's because this type of behavior diminishes the honor of the warrior. Honor is the most important possession, valued way beyond life, or death. And honor is a concept that has a long history in German society, an evolution in what the conception of honor is. Equally important is the responsibility of loyalty, loyalty to one's leader. I should give you some of the German terms at times because they, very often all you need is that word and you know everything that comes with it. And loyalty is Treue. Treue, I should have looked up the etymology. It sounds similar to, well, truth doesn't seem right. But Treue. I'll look it up for you and tell you exactly what the etymology of that is, where that comes from. So, to defend or protect the chief, and to ascribe one's own brave deeds to the glory, to the honor of your chief is the most extreme virtue for a Germanic warrior. This is unfortunately another part of what Tacitus said as a virtue of the Germanic tribes that was misused later in Nazi propaganda. This idea of honor, or not honor, but loyalty, the virtue of loyalty to your leader. And we will talk more about that later. Related to the concept of honor was also the requirement of what in German is Rache, revenge. If your honor, or the honor of your chief, or indeed any of your clansmen or tribesmen was damaged, you had the responsibility to set things right, to put things back in order. You insult one of my clan, and by the way, an insult is just as bad as murder. Because an insult, in fact, in many instances worse, an insult damages your honor. And honor, once honor is gone, life is of no value. So you insult one of my tribes, my responsibility is to seek revenge on the other. Revenge in the form of usually not another insult, but death, a battle. This could, of course, created long vendettas, which could go on forever, but in many instances there was also the ability to resolve these conflicts by using blood money, Blut, Wehrgeld, which is money for a person. In other words, you get together with the offending party and say, listen, you've offended us, we don't want to go on killing all of your people. How much is your cousin worth? 2 oxen, 3 plus 3 chicken, or whatever. You come to an agreement, and at least that's a way to end this. Unfortunately, that wasn't always the case, and we'll see later about this notion of revenge as being a reason to wipe out an entire Germanic tribe. Another sacred code, similar actually to ancient Greek society, was that of guest friendship, Gastfreundschaft. As Tacitus stated, to exclude any human being from their roof is thought impious. The host had the responsibility of caring for the guest, even before inquiring who the guest was, what standing the guest was. That could come, and that would come later. The host was also responsible for the safety of the guest. As long as the guest was in his house, let's say it was in your house, and you have this person as a guest, you're responsible for his safety. You're also responsible for leading him away on his travels and to keep him safe there. If you run out of food that night, if you don't have the room for the guest, it's your responsibility to bring the guest to a neighbor. And that neighbor has the responsibility of accepting the guest. And again, you're responsible for the safety of that person from one house to another, at which point that responsibility gets transferred to the next host, and that goes forth, so on. When people are traveling, that's actually a very handy thing to have. There could be some problems with this, though, at times. There's an old Nordic myth where you have a chief whose son was recently murdered. To his house comes a guest, and he takes the guest in and does exactly what he's supposed to do. During the evening's dinner, eventually the conversation turns to recent events, and the host discovers that his guest is the murderer of his son. So, what does he do? What's his responsibility? Provide safe passage, no matter what. He also has a responsibility for revenge. So we have a conflict. However, guest friendship is sacred. That rules above revenge. That's not going to go away. But he's responsible for the safety of his guest for that evening and for safe passage in the morning. Now, somewhere down the road, when that relationship has ended, he has the responsibility of revenge. Or it could be members of his clan. It doesn't have to be just as a person. For those of you who have visited Germany, you may remember or have noticed the importance of beer in German society. Germans view, well, not just beer, but alcohol in moderation as something good and not inherently evil. It can be abused, of course, and unfortunately that does happen. But beer in German society is a very important cultural aspect. And you might find it enlightening to hear that in the 23rd chapter of Tacitus, he describes how mead is made, which is similar to beer. He notes that, and I quote from him, "The Germans, in quenching their thirst, are not moderate. If you indulge their love of drinking by supplying them with as much as they desire, they will be overcome by their own vices as easily as by the arms of an enemy." You have to be careful here, though. Mead was, we didn't have refrigerators, shouldn't say mead. They didn't have refrigerators at that time. And mead was made in large quantities for big gatherings in the mead halls, and it wouldn't keep, so what do you do? So it's not as bad as it sounds. Yeah. Tacitus also informs us about the deities that the Germans worshipped. Chief among them was Mercury, using the Latin. In German, Mercury is Wodan or Wotan, and further north, Odin. They're all the same person. He goes on to mention Hercules, who's Donar in German, and in English he's Thor. Well, yes, that is English now, I guess I could say. You're used to maybe hearing Thor, which is Nordic actually, and as well as Mars, the god of war, who for the Germans is Tiwas. Some days of the week actually are named after these gods. We still have that. German Donnerstag, so Donar's Day is tomorrow. And tomorrow here is Thor's Day, is it not yet? Thor's Day. We've changed from O to U, which is fine. That happens over the course of 2,000 years. Tiwas was yesterday, Tiwas Day, Tuesday, and today in German is Mittwoch, which is middle of the week, which has nothing to do with any Germanic mythology. However, in English, we're more Germanic. We have Wednesday, Wotan's Day. So today is Wodanstag. with a few changes along the way in vowels. But so we have Wotanstag, Wednesday. That's where Wednesday comes from. And the day after tomorrow is Frühjahrstag. Freya was the wife of Wotan, just as Hera was to Zeus. There are a lot of familiarities or similarities between Germanic and actually Roman and Greek mythology. The only thing is, Germanic gods were not immortal. We'll have to talk about that later. They could die. In fact, we knew that they would die, that there would come at some point a great end battle where the Titans would defeat the Germanic gods, because that was fate. But I won't get into that now, but should mention that later when we do the Nibelungen. So, Frühjahr's day is Friday, and Saturday and Sunday get a little complicated, so we won't go there. The tribes that Tacitus wrote about began to migrate throughout Europe, and this is called the Völkerwanderungen, which is wandering of the peoples, or migrations of the peoples. And there were two waves of these migrations between 300 and 700 of our common era. Why these tribes began to move from place to place, we're not really sure. There are a lot of theories as to why this happened. As you can see, they're just moving and changing places all over, and of course there are plenty of battles during these times when they have incursions into foreign territory. One of the theories is that it was climate change. That in the north, and there was a movement toward warmer areas in the south. I've read about some other interesting claims that, sort of like folk etymologies, is that, well, it's the Wanderlust of the Germans. They just wanted to get up. The Wanderlust is this joy of travel which Germans have, and particularly toward the south. If you go to Florida in the winter, or to the Grand Canyon, you're going to hear more German than English. And the same thing in Italy. We're going to the land where the lemons bloom, is an age-old German saying. I doubt that there were so many tribes that thought, oh, let's just pack up and go travel because we just have an inclination to do so. So we don't really know. All we know is they did. They moved around. However, we don't have many works of literature from this period, or at least that survived from this early period. So we're actually going to go through all of them. It's very comprehensive. You'll see, it won't take long. The only intact piece that we have that actually mentions the Germanic deities are two short magical incantations called the Merseburger Zaubersprüche. Zauber is magic, and Spruch is a saying, in this case an incantation. They're called the Merseburger Zaubersprüche because, or Merseburg magical incantation, because that's where they're stored in this, the city of Merseburg. I think, well, as you can see here, what this talks about, we have Fol and Wodan. Wodan we know. Fol is, well, we're not really sure who he is, but probably a servant of Wodan's, and into the woods. And the foot of Balder's foal was sprained. Balder and Fol are probably just two names for the same person. So Sintgut, Suna's sister, conjured it, and Freya, Fola's sister, conjured it. And so we have here the women, some of whom are Valkyries, trying their hand at healing the foot. And Wodan conjured it as well he could. and then say it gives the magical incantation. Like bone sprain, so blood sprain, so joint sprain. Bone to bone, blood to blood, joints to joints, so they may be mended. Doesn't sound very magical, so I'm actually going to read you this in the Old High German version, so you get a sense and hear that there's a lot in the sounds to give this magical spell some, I don't know, credibility, but give it some power. Also, follow along and see the similarities in a lot of the sounds, so that you can, there's a lot more German that you know that you may not be aware of. So, it's Fohlen de Bodan, fuhren zu Holza, dort demo Wanderes Fohlen sind Fuß berenkit, so begolen Sentgut suna Swista, so begolen Fria voller Swista, so begolen Bodan so he voller Konda, so se benrenki, so se blutrenki, so se liedrenki. Ben se bene, blut se blöder, lit se gelitten, so sie gelimida sehen. And the horse gets up. No, we don't have that. Is healed. The other magical incantation, so we're only going to read 50% of those that we have. That's one. The other one is actually even shorter, and it is for the freeing of prisoners or hostages who are in shackles. And here it's the Valkyries, who are the servants of Wotan, come and give this incantation, and the fetters open magically to free the prisoner. The oldest truly literary work we have is the Lay of Hildebrand, the Hildebrandslied. This is the Hildebrandslied, which is the song of Hildebrand, or the Lay of Hildebrand. These old heroic lays or song were written in alliterative verse. What that means is called Stabreim, and that's the first letter, the first sound, not letter, the first sound of the key words alliterate. And so, particularly these were oral transmissions, and so it had practical applications. The important words are the ones that would stand out that you would hear. So if we, and this is Old High German, they all start out, I heard it tell, I heard tell, or I heard it told, or any number of those things, which adds validity to what is going to be said. I heard tell that warriors met in a single combat, Hildebrand and Hadebrand, and you can see the translation here. Listen to the alliteration that we have. Ich gehörte dat sagen, dat sich Wurtin anon Murtin, Hildebrand, Eddie Hadebrand, or the Herium Twain. We have the two key characters, Hildebrand, Hadebrand, Herium are armies. So we have, okay, armies here, and the two people. Suna Fatarungo, Io, Sato Richtung, and so forth. So here's the scenario in this particular song. Hildebrand was a loyal vassal of his Ostrogoth chieftain, Theodoric, whom he had followed to the court of Attila the Hun. This is actually a reversal of historical events, but we're not in literature. We use the historical events to our own purposes. And he went to the land of the Huns to flee Odovacar, who was the first German king of Italy. Odovacar actually conquered the Roman Empire in 476, and he was then deposed about 10 years later by Theodoric. Hildebrand has been gone at the Huns, in the Huns lands, he's been gone 30 years. He left behind a wife and son. So you can imagine his son is probably 30 years old. And he's been gone 30 years, so we won't guess how old he is, maybe probably in his 50s, something like that. His son has also become a great warrior and a loyal vassal of Oroka. Remember that concept of loyalty? Toya, which is very important. So the two warriors, both loyal vassals of their respective kings, meet on the battlefield. This is when the two armies are coming, and they're in front of their respective armies. Keep in mind that all that transpires here is in front of the armies. So this is all very much public. Hildebrand, as is customary, asks who his foe is. You want to know who it is because with all the migrations of the peoples, it's not unheard of you would run into a relative at some point. And you don't want to fight a relative if you can help it. Hildebrand states who he is and who his father was. He has gotten reports that his father had died, and he believes that his father is dead. It doesn't take long, however, for Hildebrand to realize that his son stands before him, and Hildebrand actually hints that they are related. And in a gesture of friendship, he takes an armband off and hands it to his son on the point of his spear. They're not that close together, so. Hildebrand, his son, thinks that this is a ploy and insults his father, Hildebrand, refuses the gift and saying, well, you're an old Hun and this is trickery, which is, of course, a grave insult to Hildebrand. So with the knowledge that he's facing his only son, and he has to do battle with his son. So what is he to do? Well, Hildebrand laments that either his son has to kill him or he kills his son. And we know that they begin to fight. And that's where our poem breaks off. However, we can determine how this probably ended. It might be an interesting place to stop for a 10-minute break and think of the possibilities. I'll just say briefly that this is always a great exercise with my students when we're reading this. After Tacitus and learning about all the Germanic virtues, so what do? They somehow come to a reconciliation and say, father, son, happy to see you, or finally get to meet you. They fight. Hildebrand knows that that's his son, and so he holds back. He's not about to kill his son, and his son kills him. Or they keep on battling, and they get so tired so that eventually they sit down and can't go any longer, find out who they are, and have a reconciliation. Or what are some of the other things that the students do? A common one is, well, Hildebrand kills his son and immediately goes out and hangs himself. So we'll talk about some of those after. Okay, so have you figured out the ending? So we know the combatants are speaking during the battle, and one of the scenarios is that Hildebrand, the son, finally recognizes his father, which is really not very likely. All reports he's gotten is that his father's died, and he sees this as a ruse, a trick. Remember, this is at the beginning of the battle, so that's not very likely. The other one was the father has pity for the son and willingly allows the son to defeat him. Hildebrand is a loyal vassal of of his chieftain, Theodoric. His first responsibility is to his leader. Since he's at the forefront of the battle, he's obviously the most valuable to Theodoric. So, it's impossible for him to be disloyal. That would impugn not only his honor, but also the honor of his son. By holding back in battle, his son's honor in the battle would be diminished. Can't allow that as well. Remember, honor and loyalty were more important than life and death. The other possibility is students like to suggest, okay, he has to kill his son, but then goes to commit suicide right away. Taking his own life would be extremely disloyal to the person who needs him most at this time. So he can't do that. He has not committed any dishonor. Well, he hasn't, and he won't. So there would be no reason to believe that he would be disloyal to his leader and take his own life. Some students, I forgot to mention, they like to make it a lot neater and nicer, and that they do battle. They realize, okay, we have to battle, but they like to have them kill each other at the same time. So that it ends up and nobody feels guilty. It's made for fun discussions. So we all know, we agree that they battle, and they battle vigorously. So the question is, if that's the case, who wins? Students usually are pretty unanimous in this. Obviously the son. He's young. He's 30 years old. He's battling a 50-year-old. You'll rejoice in the knowledge that in this time period, age, wisdom, craft, knowledge trumps youth. Experience is more important. So it's generally accepted that Hildebrand actually does kill his son, Hildebrand. Besides, since he knows what he's done and has to live with that, it's more tragic. If the son kills the father, he thinks he's killed a great warrior, and that's the end of it. We also have something that we found centuries after that in an old Norse source entitled Hildebrand's Death Song, in which he's in a battle briefly before his own death, and he laments the fact that, as he says, against my will I became my son's murderer. So he had to become his son's killer, not murderer. So that's how that ends. Even though it's very tragic, it follows Germanic, the system of Germanic virtue and honor. We were talking before that I'm going to skip over some history of, do you know who Karl the Great is? I bet you do. It's just that we call him Karl the Great in German, but he's actually Charlemagne. The Germans claim him because he was a Germanic. He was the first major Germanic king of the Holy Roman Empire. And it's because of Charlemagne that a lot of what we have has been preserved, because he was interested in preserving the old artifacts of Germanic peoples. Unfortunately, his successors didn't share his view and destroyed much of what was there. They were going about destroying things that had pagan content in them. And so that's why we have so little that's available to us. The Hildebrandslied is interesting, as I was talking to Eric at the back before, is that it was written down in the 10th century on the back of Bible pages. even though there's nothing Christian in the content of it. It was stolen then from Fulda, and it resurfaced in this country after the war in 1948, and fortunately it has made its way back. If you can ever find, by the way, that second page, you can make a lot of money. So at this time, in the era of Charlemagne, and actually just before then, the Goths converted to Christianity quite early in the fifth century, and then there was a gradual conversion of the Germanic tribes. But the Saxons way up north gave all sorts of trouble to be converted. The conversion at that time was convert or die. So conversion was by the sword. But the Saxons still vacillated between Christ and Wotan, and so Charlemagne's successor, Louis the Pious, commissioned a work to help instruct the Saxons about Christianity. And what he did is wrote this work which talks about, which is really the Passion. It's based upon the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to whom the author of what's called the Heiland, which is the Saxon Gospel, which is the birth of Christ and the entire story of the castle. What's interesting about this is it's that the story of Jesus has been transposed, retold, as if it had all occurred in northern Germany, in the Germanic world. This is an epic poem of over 8,000 lines, and the geography is, of course, northern Europe. German word for castle is Burg, and so we find Bethlehem is Bethlehem Burg, Nazareth is Nazareth Burg, which basically is Nazareth Castle, or Fort Bethlehem, and the apostles are cast in the role, as you might expect, of loyal vassals of Christ. I think you'll find it interesting. I'd like to compare what the Heiland author, the Heiland poet, we don't know who he is. There's a lot of research that's going in to try to find it, but no luck yet. So the place to begin with is the birth of Christ. So I want to read you how the Heiland poet renders the story from Luke. So you get a good sense of how this was used in the conversion of the Germanic peoples. The good Joseph went also with his household, just as God ruling mightily willed it. He made his way to his shining home, the hill fort at Bethlehem. This was the assembly place for both of them, for Joseph, the hero, and Mary, the good, the holy girl. This was the place where in olden days the throne of the great and noble good King David stood for as long as he reigned, enthroned on high, and Earl of the Hebrews. Joseph and Mary both belonged by birth to his household. They were of good family lineage, of David's own clan. I have heard it told, watch out, here comes truth. I have heard it told that the shining workings of fate and the power of God told Mary that on this journey a son would be granted her, born in Bethlehem, the strongest child, the most powerful of all kings, the great one come powerfully to the light of mankind. You'll notice a certain consistency there in the adjectives, the descriptions. Just as foretold by many visions and signs in this world many days before. At that time it all came to pass just as wise men had said long ago, that the protector of people would come in a humble way, by his own power to visit this kingdom of earth. His mother, that most beautiful woman, took him, wrapped him in clothes and precious jewels, And then with her 2 hands laid him gently, the little man, that child, in a fodder crib, even though he had the power of God and was the chieftain of mankind. There the mother sat in front of him and remained awake, watching over the holy child and holding it. And there was no doubt in the mind or in the heart of the holy maid. What had happened became known to many over this wide world. The guards heard it. As horse servants, they were outside. They were men on sentry duty, watching over the horses, the beasts of the field. You'll notice how the description stresses the nobility of the holy couple. And what really stands out is how the writer of the Heliand goes to great lengths to assure his listeners of the strength and power of the baby Jesus. We find this in various other works of literature at this same time, during the time of conversion, where writers diplomatically do not deny the existence of Wotan or the other Germanic gods, but then go to great lengths to point out, you can have them, but we have one that's more powerful. And this power of Christ, of the Christians, has to be really made clear to the Germanic peoples before they can accept many elements of Christianity, like turning the other cheek, which is hard to comprehend for a Saxon warrior. Similarly, the baby Jesus is wrapped in jewels. But you have to assure the Saxon listeners that Joseph and Mary are upper class, and thus their son is as well upper class. And for this reason, horse servants are used, watching over the beasts of the field. They take the place of sheep and shepherds, which are considered lower class. So we have to change that. You'll also mention there's no mention of no room at the inn. That would be incomprehensible. That's a violation of the code of guest friendship. That wouldn't happen. So we just leave it up. Later on, at the point where Jesus travels to raise Lazarus from the dead, we hear in Scripture how Jesus wishes to return to Judea, but the disciples are reluctant to do so. And we have Thomas, as reported by John in chapter 11, let us also go that we may die with him. And that's the extent of it. As you'll notice, the Heliand author is very often expands where he has the opportunity. And this is how the Heliand author reports this occurrence. The time had come nearer when he would go back to Jerusalem to show them the power he had. The chieftain's son told his warrior companions that he wanted to go back over the Jordan to the Jewish people. His followers immediately responded to him, "Why are you so keen, my Lord?" They said to go back there. It was not so long ago that they intended to punish you for your words. They wanted to throw heavy stones at you. Now you are determined to travel back to those people where you have plenty of enemies, arrogant earls looking for a fight. Then one of the 12, Thomas was his name, he was an excellent man, the chieftain's devoted thane. He said, "We should not criticize his action or obstruct his will in this manner. We should continue on, stay with him, and suffer with our commander." That is what a thane or vassal chooses, to stand fast together with his Lord, to die with him at the moment of doom. Let us all do it, therefore, follow his road and not let our life spirits be any worth to us compared to his alongside his people. Let us die with him, our chieftain. Then our decision and doom will live on after us. A good word among men. And so the followers of Christ, nobly born earls, came to a simple decision to their Lord's delight. So, as you can see, the poet of the Helion expands significantly the entire episode of the Passion and Death in terms of Germanic last stand military terms. The disciple's role is that of loyal vassal to his chieftain, and as Tacitus commented, the loyal vassal stands by his commander at all costs. So you might then wonder, how does the author of the Helion deal with the betrayal of Judas? Actually, the betrayal and condemnation of a traitor really doesn't need explanation for Saxon warriors. However, the Helion does expound a bit. I read from the work. Christ took some of the food in front of the men and put it into the hands of Judas. This is at the point where he's telling Judas he will betray him. That puts it into the hand of Judas, that mean criminal, and spoke directly to him in front of his warrior companions and told him to leave his people immediately. Do what you are thinking, he said. Do what you are going to do. You cannot keep your intentions concealed any longer. Fate is at hand. The time has now come close. So as soon as the disloyal traitor took the food and put it in his mouth to eat, the power of God left him. Cruel things started going into his body, horrible little creatures. This is a quotation from the Helion. Satan wrapped himself tightly around his heart, since God's help had abandoned Judas in this world. This is the woeful situation of people who under heaven change lords. The parallel scripture in the Bible from John is actually, now the Son of Man is glorified and God is glorified in him. A lot shorter, to the point. It has been altered to underscore the workings of fate in Judas, but it's also about the fate of Christ. The section ends with a clear warning for the warrior. Once the feudal bond is broken by the vassal, he no longer has the protection of his Lord. Scripture also explains how Judas arrived at Gethsemane with a great crowd armed with swords and cudgels. He told the soldiers that the one he kissed is your man. You're probably all familiar with this part of the betrayal of Judas. And after doing so, the soldiers come forth to seize Jesus. And the scripture reports in Matthew, one of those with Jesus reached for his sword and drew it, and he struck at the high priest's servant and cut off his ear. But Jesus said to him, "Put up your sword. All who take the sword die by the sword." Luke mentions the cutting off of the ear, but it's pretty brief. And the other gospel writers do as well. Some don't. Someone keeps it remarkably simple. The author of the Helion, however, takes advantage of the opportunity to supply some entertainment, blood and gore, to his readers so that they can identify with what's going on here. So this is what how the Helion reports this. Then Simon Peter the mighty, the noble swordsman, flew into a rage. His mind was in such turmoil that he could not speak a single word. His heart became intensely bitter because they wanted to tie up his Lord there. So he strode over angrily, that very daring thane, to stand in front of his commander, right in front of his Lord. No doubting in his mind, no fearful hesitation in his chest. He drew his blade and struck straight ahead at the first man of the enemy with all the strength in his hand, so that Malchus was cut and wounded on the right side by the sword. His ear was chopped off. He was so badly wounded in the head that his cheek and ear burst open with a mortal wound. Blood gushed out, pouring from the wound. The cheek of the enemy's first man had been cut open. The men stood back. They were afraid of the slash of the sword. Then the Son of God spoke to Simon Peter and told him to put his sharp sword back into its sheath. If I wanted to put up a fight against the attack of this band of warriors, I would make the great and mighty God, the Holy Father in the kingdom of heaven, aware of it, so that he would send me so many angels wise and warfare that no human beings could stand up in the force of their weapons. He ends this part with, and we cannot by our deeds avert anything. He doesn't really talk about, doesn't mention specifically, live by the sword, you die by the sword. So it's, you see, the interesting thing, it really doesn't change what the scripture says. It's still true to the spirit of scripture. However, it's cloaked in something very, very different that makes it appealing, makes it interesting, and makes it understandable to the Saxon mind. So this was, let's say, in the 9th century. After 900, during the reign of King Otto the Great, there wasn't much written in German. It was all in Latin. Call it the Ottonian Renaissance. I'm going to skip over the historical parts of this, and we're not going to read anything from and talk about that because it's Latin. But in the 12th century, around this era, there came what's called the first classical period, or a golden age of German literature, which is in medieval times. During this time, German borrowed heavily from French literature, from the French troubadour songs, and from the romances. However, in this period falls also what could be considered the quintessential German heroic epic. This was written around 1200 by an unknown author. And of course I'm referring to the Nibelungenlied, the Song of the Nibelungs. Romantics in the 19th century deemed this as the German national epic. What's very interesting in this Middle High German epic of loyalty, revenge, all those things come out again, heroism and so forth. It's told within a feudalistic and now Christian society, values which sometimes can come into conflict. So let's go through the story first before we talk about it a bit. Here are these are the major characters. Siegfried is the crown prince. He's known as the Dragon Slayer. Talk about that. This takes place most of the first part. Gunther is the king of Burgundy. He has 2 brothers. His sister is Kriemhild. Brunhild, a lot of these names you probably recognize. Brunhild is the queen of Iceland. It's not the same Iceland that we know about. It's Isenland, which is off in the north. She's a beautiful maiden of almost superhuman strength. That's true. Hagen is the faithful vassal of Gunther. Etzel is Attila, king of the Huns. Etzel is just a 12th century modernization of his name. Albrecht, we don't have to worry about. He's a dwarf, was in charge of the Nibelungen treasure, which whoever had that was the richest person in the entire world. And if you're the richest person, you are also the most powerful. So King Gunther lives with his sister and brothers in the kingdom of Burgundy. They're surrounded by these loyal vassals, Hagen of Tonya, who will do anything to aid his leader and protect his king, Gunther. He is the epitome of the loyal vassal. One night, beautiful Kriemhild has a dream of a falcon flying who is then torn to pieces by 2 eagles. Her mother interprets to her falcon is a common symbol during this time, representing the lover. So her mother tells her, well, that's what's going to happen if you ever have a lover. So she decides not to marry, or never to fall in love, I should say. Siegfried, our hero for a while, he's heard of the beautiful queen and of her beauty. And if you have great outer beauty, it's also a reflection of inner goodness, inner beauty. So he's heard of her, and he decides to woo her. Siegfried is an interesting character. This is a great film if you ever want to see. Fritz Lang made a rather long film version of the entire Nibelungenlied. He stays pretty true to the plot. And this is a 1920s version of Siegfried slayed the dragon and now bathes in the dragon's blood, which of course makes one invincible, invulnerable, except, as in the case of Achilles, a linden leaf falls from a tree and lands right there. Hard to see, but it's there. Lands there, and so that's the one part of his body that doesn't get washed by dragon blood, and so that's where he is a bit vulnerable. Siegfried is also has come to possess the treasure of the Nibelungs, which is, and it's described in great terms. This is an incredible treasure that you could never use up in your lifetime. And if you have a great treasure like that, you can buy a lot of knights and warriors to protect you, which is important. He also happens to he's in the possession of a cape that when he puts it over him, he's invisible. And he has his sword, which is a super powerful sword. So he's probably, but not probably, he is known as the premier warrior in the land. So Siegfried goes to woo Kriemhild. He stays there many years, trying to win the favor of Gunther, and helps him whenever Gunther needs him. This is long. It takes him over a year before he even meets Kriemhild, but he's patient. Gunther has heard about Brunhild, who lives in Isenland, and she is actually the second most beautiful woman. The author remarks that later, that Kriemhild is actually more beautiful than she is. But Brunhild is powerful. She has superhuman strength. She is renowned as the most beautiful of women, and Gunther wants to win her over. The problem is, in order to win her over, Brunhild has set up this series of contests that potential wooers have to go through. They have to compete in a spear throw. They have to compete in throwing a rock. It took 12 men to lift this rock to get it into place on the field. You throw the rock and then leap after it, which of course no one can do. And then there are a few other tasks that she assigns. So Gunther knows, there's no way I can do this. So who does he ask for his help? Siegfried. They arrive in Island, and Siegfried has a plan. He said, well, the only way that we're going to be able to accomplish this, I didn't tell you, if you don't succeed in the task, you die. So, extra incentive to be successful. And you get to marry Brunhild. Siegfried says that the only way we're going to do this is I have to become invisible. Makes it difficult because Siegfried is known throughout the world. When these Burgundian knights arrive there, the warriors arrive there, Brunhild comes up and goes immediately to Siegfried, figuring, all right, I'm the most powerful woman in the world. Once I marry, I will lose my powers. And so whom do I have to marry? The most powerful warrior in the world. So she ignores Gunther and goes up to Siegfried and says, "Ah, you have come. Let's see if you can do this." Siegfried says, "No, I'm just a vassal of Gunther," which, as the author says, this is incredible deference to Gunther to claim that he's a vassal, which is not true. This is his ruse, so he can fade into the background and then put on his cloak and help Gunther. Well, he succeeds. He throws the rock using, for example, the cloak. He throws it, makes it look like Gunther does. He lifts up Gunther and jumps with him. So everything looks like Gunther has done it. And so the Burgundians return to Burgundy, to Worms on the Rhine, where they live. And a double wedding is performed because Siegfried has said, "I'll help you, but the one condition is that you have to give me your sister as a wife." Of course, Kriemhild is thrilled about this because at that point they've come to know each other, and there's nothing in the world that she wishes more than to become the wife of Siegfried. So a great double wedding is performed, and it's during this time that the author claims that, boy, Brunhild, everyone's amazed at her. However, you know, Kriemhild is still, you can't resist saying that she is pretty, more noble. Brunhild gets a little suspicious at this point because says, how can a vassal marry off, or how can a king marry off his sister to a vassal? Doesn't seem right. And Gunther says, "Don't worry, I'll explain it to you later." The author mentions that's problematical. So after the wedding, they retire to the bedchamber. This is Gunther's night. In the wedding night, Gunther wrestles, they're in bed. Gunther wrestles with his bride. She defeats him and says she's not going to consummate the marriage. She hangs him up on the wall where he spends the night. And this lasts for a while, and so it's the author comments ironically saying that Kriemhild had a much, and I should say Siegfried had a much more enjoyable wedding. Okay, so that's the basis, so we're going to stop here then for a while, and we'll see how this ends. It ends, well, you know how it has to end, tragically. It's based on some historical events, mainly the wiping out of the entire Burgundian tribe by the Huns. So that's why we have Attila. Attila doesn't come in until the second half, so hang on for the second half to see what happens here. Okay, thank you. I forgot to mention at the beginning that if you have any questions for me, please feel free to ask. If you have anything that you want to know about, or anything that you would like to see me cover, write it down on a slip of paper. Well, come up here and tell me. Not always possible. Write it on a slip of paper. Anything like that. Just communicate with me somehow. Send me an email. Email's easy. barber@grinnell.edu. Also, this is a special time. Here we have tomorrow, I think, actually 2 birthdays in the front row here. And so I think it would only be appropriate to those in true Germanic spirit loyal, trustworthy, true bucket class attendees, that we sing happy birthday to them, but we're going to sing it in German. It won't be very difficult. I think you all know the words. The song that is sung mostly at German birthday parties goes like this. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Art and Beryl. Happy birthday to you. So let's all join in together and sing. You can do it in German accent if you like, or you can do it in that other Germanic language, English. So 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Beryl. Happy birthday to you. See you next time, and we'll go the end of the Nibelungenlied, and also going to do a little bit of historical linguistics.
Is Sig short for Sigmund?
It certainly is. And Sigmund is actually the father. Is Sig's short for Sigmund, which it is. I have some stories about that. It's an old-fashioned name. But Sigmund was Siegfried's father, which is it's a good old Germanic name. Sig comes from Sieg, and it's, well, what would I say, victorious leader, something like that. Yeah. Nobody's named that anymore.
Typecasting.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Sig. That was fun. And happy birthday to you, Art, and also to Bruno. I love the German language. It's so vigorous. It isn't very romantic, but it has its own sex appeal. You can turn on your cell phones, turn off the T-file, and we look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thank you for coming this morning.